Welcome to Chandler in Focus. I am Councilmember Jeremy McClymans, and today I have the privilege of having the legendary Michael Pollack here today as my guest. Thank you for being here, Michael.
Well, it's a pleasure, Councilman, to be here with you today. And,
yes.
Well, now you're going to make it difficult for me to live up to that legendary status. My goodness.
Well, look, you're well known in the Chandler community and beyond. And can you share a little bit about your history and how you got into real estate, why you got in real estate?
Well, I've actually been in real estate now this is my 45th year. I started when I was 3. No, but I've been in it 45 years now, and I started in California, and I started out by building one house, and then I went into multifamily, and I did about 10,000 units throughout California, worked in Texas, Louisiana, kind of all over, and then ultimately in about 1990, I decided, after the urging of several brokers, to come to Arizona and check it out, and there was a lot of opportunity. So opportunity brought me to Arizona, and one of the very first projects that I did when I came to Arizona was right here in Chandler.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was, now we call it Waterfall Shopping Center. It's where Si Senor is on Elma School in Galveston. And I so far back, I can't remember if at that time Jay was still a councilman, if he was already the mayor. But I think if he was, he might have just become the mayor. And he came over to say hi. So I remember that he was out there working for the city even back then.
What year was it? Do you remember?
I believe it was 1990 when I first came to Arizona. And then I think when I did the Waterfall project, it was about 1991 or 2. Okay. So it was one of the very first projects I did.
Okay. Wow. So that's what originally attracted you to Chandler, to invest in Chandler?
Chandler, actually, I was fascinated with because I saw such potential and such potential future just looking around. Now, of course, when I first came to Chandler, coming down Elma School, once you got to Chandler Boulevard, it was like kind of almost like a country road. And did I ever think we'd see the growth that we've seen? I thought we'd see growth, but I mean, I'm just amazed every time I come down now, and I think to what we used to have when you'd go south off of Chandler Boulevard on Elma School. So I just thought there were so many things that were so special about Chandler, and I'm glad to say that I was right.
You were right massively. I think I saw the recent stat: 259,000 people. We're the 84th largest city in the United States. Wow.
Amazing, but most important, not just that. What's really important is it's a very well-run city. I think that the city has made incredible moves over the last, that I've been here, 25, almost 28 years maybe, and I'm real pleased, and I'm proud to call Chandler home. Well,
we're glad to have you. Can you tell us about? So you told us a little bit about Waterfall. Was it Waterfall?
Yeah. Yeah, originally it was called Smoke Tree. And when I took it over, it was one of the ones that was left over from the RTC days. And for those people who don't know, that's the Resolution Trust Corporation. And it was about 10% occupied and never really got finished on the inside. And so when I took it over, it was a matter of, okay, we've got to figure out a way to finish these interiors, which wasn't that difficult because I had that construction background, but I also had the real estate background too. And so I said, we're going to have to figure out a way to fill them up. And indeed we did. And then ultimately we ended up adding to it. But it was a long road in the very beginning, but it was definitely worthwhile. And I look back today and I take great pride in the fact that, it's a building that's basically 100% leased and has been for a long time. And we've got some great tenants in there. And, I think that they add a lot to that area.
That's awesome. Is there any other projects that you did around that time in that decade?
Oh yeah, we did a lot of projects here in Arizona between 1990 and basically the year 2000. We did a tremendous amount of projects, and we did several others in Chandler. One of the other ones we did in Chandler, I'm really, really proud of, and the city was great to work with. We did a project called North Park Plaza, and it's located. It was what I would consider to be way past its useful life when I saw it. It needed to be resurrected. And it was a project that had an empty grocery store. It was about 70% vacant. And I remember that when I first bought it, I had several people say, Michael, what are you going to do with this one? And I said, well, I'm going to make it beautiful. And I worked very closely with economic development at that time, and some of the people over at the building department and planning department. And we had some challenges that we had to overcome because, Chandler was still fairly new, where they weren't doing a lot of redevelopment yet. And, you have to treat redevelopment, unfortunately or fortunately, you have to treat it totally different than you treat brand new construction. Because people don't realize in brand new construction, you have a set of rules you can follow, you have a piece of land, and you work from it. But when you're trying to redevelop something that already exists, it becomes much more complicated because we can't change, for example, the parking counts. We can't change the areas usually that are involving landscaping. There's just a lot of things we can't do. But that one, we took it from the occupancy that was so low, and we've had it at about, once again, about 100% for years, ever since we did the redevelopment on it, probably 15 years ago, maybe by now. Yeah.
Wow. Well, so I mean, you touched on it, but what do you think the biggest opportunities or challenges facing Chandler now and over the next decade and years to come?
Well, I think Chandler now is in a changing mode, because now I think we're talking about infill. I think we're talking about redeveloping, recreating, reimagining areas throughout the city that have been forgotten by time. And, some of those areas will need to be repositioned possibly into a different type of a use. And then we have to look at where trends have taken us. And for example, when I first came to Chandler, I didn't even know any talk about the new freeway that was going to come in eventually.
Yeah.
And that's obviously a game changer. So, that changed many things that were planned maybe at one time, but the planning had to change because now you've got an employment, so to speak, corridor. And then the older areas of Chandler, they're going to go through this, I think, reinvention. That's going to be the key. And having a mayor and a city council that understands that, and I think we really do, and I think we're going to have a great one coming up here in Chandler. And, people like yourself who understand business, it's so important because the retail sector, the whole retail world, so to speak, has changed dramatically over the years. And so we have to be thinking about, okay, where are we going to put what and how are we going to put it there? And then we have to think, okay, in some areas, we may need to have high density multifamily in order to support the retail that's in some of our older areas.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the focuses, as you're aware, is Chandler's rebranded and put a focus in Uptown Chandler to work on some of these areas where a retailer has moved on. So, I have a vacant property. And not to put you on the spot, is there any buildings where you could give an example, not even necessarily a building you own, where we could repurpose it into something useful?
Oh, there's several examples. One that I don't own that to me would be an incredible redevelopment opportunity. If I owned it, I know what I'd do, and that's located where the Fry's was at the corner. And again, not one that I own. It's where the Fry's was at the corner of Alma School and Warner. It would be the northeast corner, and so much potential for that site. Is that potential necessarily in retail? Well, the old Fry's was an 85,000 square foot box. There's a lot of other space there. You got a Walmart, and you got a lot of other things. I think it's an unbelievable mixed use site. But again, I don't own it, so I can't speak for those people. There's a few pieces left around town in the Uptown Chandler area that are at least of some size. And do I think we need more retail? No, I don't think we really need to add more retail to the mix. I think we have enough in the Uptown Chandler area. I think what we need is what I said about downtown Chandler. And I think the city and the elected officials have done an incredible job of going in that direction. That is, we need people. Because one thing about downtown Chandler, that's what I kept saying when I first got here. Everybody talked about, we're going to redevelop downtown. Well, great, you can make the old buildings look better, but you've got to get people. You can't have the sidewalks roll up at 5 o'clock at night when whatever offices are there are closed. And I think Chandler's doing a wonderful job of getting more people in that area. And a lot of the growth of, especially where the people are locating, has been south, of course, of Chandler Boulevard. I mean, downtown, I should say, south of downtown. North of downtown, meaning in that corridor that we're calling Uptown Chandler, there hasn't been hardly any multifamily or any mixed-use development that's going on in that area. And I think we have an opportunity still in the Uptown Chandler area to see some of that mixed use, or to see some of that people that we need to shop in those shopping centers that are very important, because people have to remember that before there was a Chandler Mall, and before there was Riverview, and before there was Tempe Marketplace and all these other things, and Gilbert, there was the core area, which was the Uptown Chandler area. Well, now there's a lot of competition. So we have to reposition today for sure for tomorrow. And I think that there's no question in my mind, with people like yourself on the council and others, I think they're going to recognize that it's so important. There's always going to be, and this is a thing that I've always said, when you get a beautiful area like by the mall, the Chandler Mall, you're always going to find people that want to build something new there, because it's got so much going on in that particular area. But as you know, we've got to recreate areas like Uptown Chandler. I think we're going to see it. I think we have the right mayor. I think we have the right council, and I think we're going to see continued positive movement in that area. I really do.
Well, I know you gave some examples of some projects, but do you have any other projects, not even necessarily in Chandler, where you did redevelopment recently or in the last decade or whatnot?
Sure. Well, altogether, I should probably say, I've done about it depends on what you read, but the truth is, I think I've done a little over 11 million square feet of redevelopment,
That's it?
of redevelopment
Wow.
projects. So when people say, you really only do commercial, well, that's not necessarily true, because I did 10,000 apartment units. So I've been involved in the redevelopment side since about 1980, basically. I started as a developer in 1973, and then as a real estate agent in 73. And then in 1980, I changed over to redevelopment for two reasons. One, interest rates back then, and this might scare some people, but the truth is interest rates back then were 18%, 1979, 1980. And so getting money to build new projects wasn't the most sane thing to do at the time. So we started doing redevelopment, where we could get owner financing and we'd redevelop existing product. And but ever since about 1980, I've been doing redevelopment. I've been a proponent of, we must take today's problem properties, today's eyesores, and we must reposition them, or they will unquestionably become tomorrow's slums. So we've got to deal with it. And Chandler, of course, is getting pretty close to build out. So what do you do when you get close to build out? You go back into those other areas that have already been developed, and you make them better. And that's why I see such excitement in the potential future for Chandler. I really do.
Well, so as far as when you've done 11 million?
You know what? I get tired when I think about it.
11 million square feet. That's a astronomical. Well, do you have a project that you can walk us through, kind of the step by step on? Like I think you said you had one in Gilbert. I know that's not Chandler. Tell me about that project.
It was a project that was really a lot of fun, because I wanted to prove to myself that you could take a project that was so vanilla that it was ridiculously ugly. And yet I knew the project, and a lot of people knew it, because it's located at the corner of Gilbert and Ray. There's a horse up on the top of the saddlery. And when I first came to town, I saw that, and I'm like, a horse on top of the roof. But they had a clause within their lease that they could have that. And of course, it was grandfathered for many, many years. It was there 20 years probably before I came to town. And so it's been there forever. And it became a challenge because, in new codes, for example, they don't call out horses on roofs, but they had it in their lease, and we had to figure out a way to work around it. So I decided, okay, I'm going to build this into like a Western theme, and I'm going to do different storefronts for similar to like a Disneyland to every single one of these stores that we have there. And I wanted to do it too, because I want to do this on a large scale eventually. I have to find the right project for it. But I'm really looking forward to doing that and creating a personality for each one of the spaces. It's expensive. It's the most expensive project I ever did. It's one of the smallest ones I've done, but it was the most expensive because of the creativity that I wanted to have. And then I made the mistake right before we started designing it of going to Disneyland. We'll never do that when you like to get carried away sometimes on your designs.
Yeah.
Never do that.
Yeah.
But anyhow, the city was able to work with us and help us so that we could figure out a way to. We built a balcony on one that was more like an old style saloon, and on the top of the balcony was the horse. So we were able to bring the horse back, and it was a really big day for a lot of people in that neighborhood because there's a lot of horse property around there. But I'll give you an example of one that we had right here in Chandler. When we did the project over on Arizona Avenue and Ray called North Park, and that went from I think just a plain ugly project to something that the city I know was very proud of when we finished. We're still proud of it. The people in the neighborhood are proud of it. And I'm proud to say we're seeing now, thanks to the work the city has done, we're seeing multifamily and we're seeing residential development right around there. When I first bought it, there was a field with nothing but horses across the street. But we ran into a problem with it. We had, once again, you're dealing with an existing project, not one that we can build from scratch that we get to look at a set of rules and say we can follow them. Well, there was a monument sign that was non-conforming. And it was like, okay, look, I can't do this project if I've got to take this sign down because I've got 3 tenants who have the right to be on that sign and I have no right to cancel those leases. I have no right to modify their right to the sign. Well, in some cities that I've worked in before, not here in Arizona, but other places, they'd be like, well, we don't know what to do and we can't do anything. Well, Chandler figured it out. And they said, you know what? It is non-conforming, but he's not going to take it down and we'll let him remodel it to make it look better. But I had no choice. And so Chandler worked around that and they did a great job. And we were able to bring that corner from a absolutely dead looking and dead acting center to one that's been pretty much full ever since that. And so it takes creativity. And because we're at that point in Chandler where build out is virtually, we're almost there. We need to now go in and take care of those areas that are challenged. The last thing we want to see in Chandler, God forbid, would be like what we see over there in that Fiesta district in Mesa. All due respect to Mesa, but that should have never gone that bad. I mean, the way it's boarded up, and that just shouldn't have happened. But unfortunately, if you don't follow the trends in what's happening, that is what happens. I mean, that's examples that people use throughout the country because I do speeches all over the country. And when I'm there, people will say, well, what do we need to be very careful of? And we don't want to be like that city we have.
Sure.
And but there's a solution. There would have been a solution years ago for that. That would have been you needed shoppers to shop in the shopping center. And when, of course, they built the other 2 huge ones with Tempe Marketplace and Riverview coming online at the same time, those of us in the business, at least, all knew it was going to create a problem because you can only have so much pie, and there's only so many people to eat the pie.
Well, that was one of the primary reasons I'm so glad you came on today, of why I wanted you on the show, because Chandler's 86% built out. There's really only infill lots, and then there's the redevelopment. And I think it's important that we have more discussion about what redevelopment looks like. And nobody but you has had years of experience of redevelopment and what it takes to get creative and start shifting the paradigm on what do we need to do to make Chandler awesome. Or Chandler's already went from good to great, from great to elite.
Well, and the key is to keep it there.
Yeah.
There's an old saying in sports, you're only as good as your last game. Well, yes, I think Chandler's an incredible city. I love Chandler. And I think that it is in a great place. It wasn't irresponsible. There are cities, and I'm not going to mention any names, but there are cities still that have basically mortgaged their grandchildren, I would say, or great-great-great-great-grandchildren, and they're not paying attention to it. And to me, I don't think that's right. If a city runs like a business would have to run, and Chandler's been able to do that, then I think that makes that city that much stronger, and ultimately it'll continue to be vibrant. But it's about leadership. It's about people like yourself and the council. It's the mayor of the cities, all the council members, putting their hats together and saying, or heads together rather, and saying, hey, we want to keep this city great, and we recognize what the challenges are. And in redevelopment, or once you get to the build out portion that we're at here in Chandler, that's, a real project, because you've got to always be thinking about, like chess. If you make this move, then this could do this, or if that does that. And you have to be flexible in the thinking. And one thing Chandler has, I'll tell you, there's some brilliant private sector minds that are in Chandler that I know are willing to get together and talk and have committees. And, I look forward to being part of some of those coming up. And we've got some attorneys that work in this area too that are brilliant guys. And anytime a city can take advantage of people within that city that are willing to work for free and know what they're doing,
sure,
then take advantage of it,
Absolutely, yeah. Well, any other last thoughts you want to share to the residents about the commercial real estate in Chandler, economic development in the community? Anything we could do different, better? Anything else?
I think Chandler's definitely on the right track. I mean, right now you've got Micah in economic development. He's working real hard on the Uptown Chandler, plus all the other things he works on. You've got Derek Horn now running the department over there for the building. And he, to me, is a special guy. I've had the opportunity of working with him already a couple of times, and he's a problem solver. And that's what you need. To have a great city, you have great people in Chandler. There's no question about that. But and you've had great leaders along the way. There's no question about that. But you also have to have great people that work at that city. And there's just a couple of examples. And there's so many people that are in Chandler that work here in this great city that are wonderful people. And they want to see Chandler. I mean, they're devoted to it. They just really want to see it continue to prosper, to grow, and be a place that everybody that lives in Chandler can be proud of. And I think that it's, as long as the responsible financial thinking stays there with Chandler, I think you've got a city that will be in one of the top cities in the country for a long time to come. And I hope for forever, for that matter. It's just a great city.
Well, Chandler certainly has got a lot of good things going on, especially since we have residents like you in the community investing and living and making it a great city. I certainly want to thank you for taking time today.
Well, it's a pleasure.
Yeah,
pleasure.
Thank you, sir. And thank you for watching. I'm Councilmember Jeremy McClymans, and see you next time on Chandler in Focus. Well,